Hello and welcome to this YouTube channel called The Climate Emergency and Spiritual Values. This is my channel. I am Chris Philpott and it's based on my new book, The Climate Emergency and Green Spirituality, Activism, The Last Chance to Change Our Values. This is program 6. About the deeper causes of climate change. Do you know, when I was 10 and I'm now 70, I spent many days in the woods in Lincolnshire on my own, walking down the road on my own to the woods, and I thought I was an explorer. And my love of nature started there because I was connected with it. Now we look at the world. The majority of the world is urban. People live in bubbles of reality. Cities are getting bigger, mega cities. Shanghai, Tokyo, Mumbai. Part of the threat of climate change, even if you look at sea level rise, a lot of people live in these urban places near the sea where they're going to be overrun. But what I found from the change of my childhood to now, and having worked in schools a lot, is that people seem to live, in developed countries anyway, in a digital reality. And this symbolises the disconnection from nature. I wrote a song for my band, the Eco Messengers, and it's a very simple idea, and it came from a friend of mine who's recently died, who I had deep respect for, Ray, and it says, where would we be without our surroundings? Our disconnect from nature is astounding. So I've always had a passion for it. So what I did in part of my education was start eco clubs, and I've built 2 nature reserves at schools. And here is one of them. You can see the wildlife pond and the young trees in a nature reserve created at one school called Paintings Plantation. Because I wanted children to understand the connection with nature and how it works. This is what we're missing. Because we don't understand climate change, because we think we're separated from it. We think our actions, as we saw in Program Karma, have nothing to do with the environment. And in fact, we depend on it for our very lives. Now, what are we doing to this planet? We're treating nature with so much disrespect. We burn down our forests like Bolsonaro is doing in Brazil. We ruin habitats for wild animals. We erode the soils, as you can see from this picture, when we need soils to grow our food. We overfish the seas, and there won't be any fish in the sea if we eat them all. We cut down the rainforests. So these places like the Amazon that could absorb carbon dioxide, we're cutting them down. Not only that, we burn them so we create more carbon dioxide. So biodiversity goes. Don't forget, most crops come from wild species of plant that are being found in places like the Amazon. Most medicines come from those areas. Like aspirin is based on the bark of a tree in the rainforests. By our farming methods, we're destroying nature. But even, as you can see from this picture, people go out and shoot wild animals and eat them. So these photographs illustrate a disconnect. Nothing to do with me, Gov, but it is. Spiritual teachings say that we're intrinsically connected with nature. Now in Hinduism, we've mentioned before in previous programs, all nature is divine. This is because Hindus believe all life comes from God, emanates from God. And with their theory of the transmigration of souls, that we come back, people have been animals and plants in the last incarnation. So we must respect animals and plants. People are amazed in India when they see cows wandering round the street. But in India, the cow is holy. Krishna was a cowherd. He looked after cows. And I went to Mathura, and I went to the farm of the Society of Krishna Consciousness. Now here, when you drink milk, cow's milk, you think nothing of the males, calves that could be killed because they don't produce milk. But guess what? In their herd, they kept all the male animals and fed them because they saw them as part of an emanation of God. I had the great privilege to meet Swami Dharamanda, as you can see from this picture, in Rishikesh. And he said, Hinduism teaches us to understand the laws of nature and respect them. The holy book, the Bhagavad Gita, says the whole world is a living whole, a vast interconnectedness of cosmic harmony, inspired and sustained by the One Supreme. So they have respect for nature. Jainism we mentioned in previous programs. It was very much taken up by Gandhi in his philosophy of non-violence. It's Jain philosophy called ahimsa. No violence to other creatures at all. Very environmentally conscious religion. It's based on the principle of interdependence. All nature is bound together. Bound together. If we don't care for its nature, then we don't care for ourselves. So, Mahavishnu said, he's the founder of Jainism, one who neglects or disregards the existence of earth, air, fire, water and vegetation, disregards his own existence, which is entwined with them. Another Jain saying, all life is bound together by mutual support and interdependence. So the Jains have a strong visualization that we're all connected. And I've seen this. A Jain monk will not just lie down. He'll have a brush to brush so that there be no insects that die. A Jain monk and nun has a face covering, as you could see from these pictures, so that we don't breathe in insects. They filter water so they don't kill anything. They're very conscious, because to them all life forms are sacred. In Buddhism, it's hard for people to understand, but they don't see nature as separate. It's an illusion that there's separateness from nature. What they say in Buddhism, we're not seeing the true nature of reality. What they see in Buddhism is the health of the whole is linked to the health of the parts. And the health of the parts are linked to the health of the whole. So there's interdependence. Meditation, I practice every day. It's good because it grounds you. You realise that your existence really is no greater than anybody else's. And as with Jains, there was rebirth in Buddhism. The Buddha often talked about his previous lives in animals. So if somebody's going to be your relative, way down the line, you're going to be kind to them because you can relate to them. So it's interdependence of life. The Dalai Lama stated this quite clearly. Interdependence is a fundamental law of nature. The young Karmapa, I mentioned before, said, recognizing our intimate dependence on the natural environment allows us to see its true value and treasure it. Thich Nhat Hanh was a famous Vietnamese Zen Buddhist. He was in the war. What he did was carried dead bodies off the battlefield so they could have a decent burial. He became a very profound teacher and started a community in France called Plum Village. This is what he said. Everything depends on everything else. The one contains the many, and the many contains the one. Ajahn Chah, famous teacher, I was privileged to attend one of his satellite monasteries with Kema Dharma, was one of his disciples. I used to go there regularly for meditation. The Thai tradition he came from was the forest tradition. So what they did is live in the forest very simply. So, what Ajahn Chah said, we can learn from nature enough to be enlightened because everything flows from the way of truth. It does not diverge from the truth. Paganism is a spiritual tradition, very ancient in Europe, particularly in the UK, where there were Celtic culture. We can see their presence in the landscape, but there's very few written records. So basically, paganism in ancient times, we know there was a connection with gods and goddesses in the landscape. And how they worshipped them, we don't know, but we know that there's great structures like Stonehenge. And I met an expert once who said there must have been thousands of people needed to build the Stonehenge. See this massive structure in the photograph. I was also blessed to go to Kalanish, which is the second biggest stone circle in the UK. There's a mystery about these things. But what we do know, there was gods, goddesses, spirits worshipped. There was a revival of paganism, because paganism certainly died out. Unfortunately, many witches were burnt and it was frowned on by the Christian church. So it died out, but then it's revived. We can see that there are ceremonies, seasons that are honoured, and certain parts of the year are honoured. We know Halloween is the time when the dead come near to us. We have these funny, scary masks and other celebrations. The Pagan Federation says there must be a balance between the self, the biosphere, and society. But what's great about paganism is a simple saying that many pagans will use. Do what thou wilt, if it harm none. There's a pagan community statement puts and sort of encapsulates their teaching. The Earth's biosphere may be understood as a single ecosystem, and that all life on earth is interconnected. Now I was very blessed to know a pagan, Emma Restel Orr. I got her to write an article about paganism for the Green magazine when I compiled an issue, God is Green, some years ago. She's a druidess, a druid priestess. She runs a natural burial ground, and I was honoured to be able to bury my friend there. And the whole burial ground is full of nature, flowers, trees. So she understands the respect and divinity of nature. Emma Restel Orr says, perceiving the world as a web of connectedness helps us to overcome the feelings of separation that hold us back, cloud our vision. This connection with all life increases our sense of responsibility for every move, every attitude, allowing us to see clearly that each soul does indeed make a difference to the whole. Starhawk has many followers, a famous pagan. She said, a real relationship with nature is vital for our magical and spiritual development and our psychic and spiritual health. It is also a vital base for any work we do to heal the earth and transform the social and political systems that are assaulting her daily. Doreen Valenti says, the planet is our home. Our life and hers are interdependent. Pam Montgomery, another famous pagan, said, we are part of the whole, and that whole changes when we are no longer consciously part of it. Which is what we're talking about today, the disconnect. Some of us don't think we're part of nature. We go on to the Bahais, which you mentioned in previous programs. In program 5, Bahá'í scriptures say that components of nature are all different on one viewpoint, and another viewpoint they're all the same, because like the Hindus, they say they emanate from God. Abdul Baha emphasized the connection with nature with this quote, and he said, by nature is meant that inherent properties and necessary relations derived from the realities of diversity, and yet intimately connected one with the other. Baha'u'llah was the founder of the Baha'is and said nature is God's will and its expression in and through the contingent world. Lastly, the last Baha'i leader was Shogha Effendi, and now they have a council that runs the Bahais, and he travelled widely in the West. So he said, we cannot segregate the human heart from the environment outside us and say that once one of these is reformed, everything will be improved. Man is organic with the world. His inner life molds the environment, as is itself also deeply affected by it. The one acts upon the other, and every abiding change in life of man is a result of these mutual reactions. So they saw the connection with nature as very important. Paganism is ancient, but shamanism, which we mentioned before, is even more ancient. Some estimate it's been around 40,000 years. It's still found in Siberia, South Korea, Australia and North America. Again, centered on the shaman, the healer who goes into a deep sense of trance to communicate with spirit animals, to help people heal. They see the sacredness of all life, an intimate connection with nature and the untamed universe. These quotes express this. Many from North American, Native American Indians. Black Elk said, "With all beings and all things we shall be relatives." The Hopi Indians of the Southwest USA express it in this way: the whole universe is enhanced with the same breath, rocks, trees, grass, earth, all animals and men. Chief Seattle, we mentioned before in previous programs, he said, "The earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth." Big Thunder, another North American Indian chief, said, "The Great Spirit is in all things. The Great Spirit is our Father, but the earth is our mother. She nourishes us. That which we put into the ground, she returns to us." There's a traditional saying, Native American Indian saying, that says, "Regard heaven as your father, earth as your mother, and all that lives as your brother and sister." The shamanic tradition very much sees everything connected. We come on now to Sikhism, which we've mentioned before. And these are quotes from the great holy book, the Guru Granth Sahib. The Sikhs see nature as an expression of God. And in the Guru Granth Sahib it says, "By divine prompting, look upon all existence as one and undifferentiated." Also says in the beautiful writings of this book, "I perceive thy form in all life and light. I perceive thy power in all spheres and sight." So they saw nature's divine and were connected with it. Christianity, people may not understand, but it has a long history of mysticism. Particularly in the Middle Ages in Europe, there were lots of mystics, hermits, holy people who were really attuned with nature. Meister Eckhart was one of these mystics, and he said, "Whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, secretly all nature seeks God and works towards him." Pope Francis has done so much for the environment. We've mentioned him in previous programs. He said, "As stewards of God's creation, we're all called to make the earth a beautiful garden for the human family. When we destroy our forests, ravage our soul and pollute our seas, we betray that noble calling. There have been modern Christian thinkers. One of them is Thomas Berry. He said, a truly human intimacy with the earth and with the entire natural world is needed. Saint Bernard, a saint of the Middle Ages, he said, you'll find something more in woods than books. Trees, stones will teach you that which you can never learn from masters. In other words, go out and learn from nature. Wendell Berry is another distinguished Christian writer, modern writer, and he had a lot to say about nature. He said, logic does not lead us from the fact that we are an integral part of the web of life to certain norms of how we should live. However, if we have deep ecological awareness or experience of being part of the web of life, then we will be inclined to care for all living nature. Indeed, we can scarcely refrain from responding in this way. So Christians, particularly with the present Pope, have said our connection with nature is vital. Lastly, we look at Taoism. We mentioned this in the previous programs. Remember, it's the sage, the one wise man who lives the life according to the Tao, or the way. So Taoism is deeply embedded with nature. One of the great teachers, Chung Tzu, famous Taoist master, and he said, he who regards all things as one is a companion of nature. Also, quite simply, saying how it is, he said, life comes from the earth, and life returns to the earth. So you can see from this program, the connectedness with nature is full in all spiritual traditions. And I said before, we've lost our way. If we really understood climate change, we'd understand that it's our behaviour towards nature that causes it. We depend on nature. We either leave this planet for future generations, or it might be lost entirely if we do not respect and care for nature, the very thing that we depend on for our survival.